Hello, salam sejahtera, and very good morning to everyone. Welcome to the Malaysian Technical Standards Forum Berhad public engagement session for draft technical codes, end-to-end quality of service and quality of experience using crowdsource applications approach. I'm Bruce Leo from University Technology in Malaysia. I'll be with you today as the moderator for this public engagement session. Let us begin the session today by welcoming our esteemed guests and speakers. Yang Berusaha Puan Zaliha Abu Bakar, the General Manager, MTSSB. Yang Berusaha Professor Dr. Tariq Abdul Rahman, Advisor of IMT and Future Networks Working Group. Yang Berusaha Mr. Rakuram Gandhi, Chairman of IFN Working Group. Yang Berusaha Mr. Shanmugam J.S. Indaran, Chairman of Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group and Technical Code Draft Lead. Yang Berusaha Professor Dr. Muhammad Yusuf alias, Mr. Aaron Franking Sun, Dr. Norehan Yahya, the panelists for our Q&A session. Members of IFN Working Groups, representative from the Ministry of Communication and Multimedia, KKMM, representative from Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission, or MCMC, representative from the industry, and our partners. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today live on Facebook. I hope everyone is geared up for an exciting event today. Don't forget to click the like and also the share button so that we can share this session with our colleagues and friends who will like to join us as well. Please feel free to say hi to everyone by leaving your comments in the Facebook Live page. To register your attendance, please scan the QR code displayed on the screen, or you can click on the link provided in the Facebook message and kindly select your name from the drop-down list in the form. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I'd like to invite Yang Berusaha and Sheikh Azmat Shazli Samsudin to lead the prayers or dua recital. Over to you, Mr. Shazli.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Let's start with the dua recital with Ummul Kitab Al-Fatiha. Auzubillah minash shaitanir rajim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Nas-siratal mustaqim, siratal ladzina Auzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Ya Allah ya Rahman ya Rahim, berkati dan rahmatilah MTSFB Public Engagement Session for Crowdsource Application 2021 pada pagi yang penuh barakah ini. Kami mohon keberkatan-Mu dalam memastikan kelancaran program ini untuk memberikan perkongsian kepada masyarakat awam dan peserta-peserta yang hadir berkaitan draft code teknik end-to-end quality of service and quality of experience using crowdsource approach. Ya Allah, Kau pemudahkanlah urusan pakar-pakar kami untuk membentangkan slide penerangan berkaitan kod teknik tersebut. Ya Allah, Kau jadikanlah para peserta yang hadir dapat turut serta memberikan komen dan kritikan yang baik untuk penambahbaikan kod teknik yang dibangunkan ini. Allahumma ya qadiyal hajat wa ya rafi'ad darajat, berkatilah segala usaha-usaha kami di dalam menjadikan organisasi MTSFB ini sebagai sebuah organisasi yang cemerlang, disegani dan dihormati oleh segenap pemain-pemain industri di Malaysia. Semoga MTSFB mampu mengeluarkan kod-kod teknik yang berguna, bermanfaat kepada komuniti dan mampu memberikan sumbangan untuk pembangunan standards dalam industri komunikasi dan multimedia di Malaysia. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzabannar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa baraka wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Shazli, for leading the prayers. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will be discussing an important technical codes on the measurement of quality of service and quality of experience in line with our national initiative, Jalinan Digital Negara, Jendela, towards realizing the aspiration to be a digitalized nation in the near future. Crowdsourcing applications has been used in the telecom industry to measure the user experience in terms of internet connection speed, coverage, latency, error performance, etc., using the data collected from the user application, known generally as the crowdsourced applications. Before we go deeper into the draft technical code, I would like to first invite Mr. Rakuram Gandhi, the chairman of the IFN working group, to give a welcoming remarks. Please welcome Mr. Rakuram on stage.
Thank you, Dr. Bruce, our moderator for today, who is also the secretary of the IMT and Future Networks Working Group. Yang Berusaha Puan Zaleha Abu Bakar, General Manager of the Malaysian Technical Standards Forum Berhad, MTSFB. Yang Berusaha Professor Dr. Tariq Abdul Rahman, Advisor of the IMT and Future Networks Working Group. Yang Berusaha Mr. Shanmugam Indiran, Chairman of Crowdsource Applications, Sub-Working Group and Technical Code Draft Lead. Yang Berusaha Professor Dr. Muhammad Yusuf Alias, Mr. Aaron Franklin Soon, and Dr. Norehan Yahya, panelists for our Q&A session. Members of IMT and Future Networks Working Group, representatives from Ministry of Communications and Multimedia, representatives from Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, MCMC, representatives from the industry and partners, ladies and gentlemen. Salam Sejahtera and a very good morning to everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank Puan Zaleha and the MTSFB team for organizing this public engagement exercise in support of the technical code that will be presented and discussed today. I would also like to thank Professor Tariq, our advisor, for all the support given. I warmly welcome all of you to this session. I'm excited and looking forward to an active and engaging discussion between the panelists and the participants. Ladies and gentlemen, this technical code was developed to define general rules and specifications on the management and usage of crowdsourced assessment methodology and reporting, and to create a reliable reference document for MCMC, service providers, and the crowdsourced vendors to meet consumer expectations. Currently, the measurement of quality of service and quality of experience is conducted using sampling method. However, there is an urgent need to further expand the measurements to cater for the growing demand. Therefore, the usage of crowdsourced applications, collecting the information direct from the users, is an option to measure these metrics. This is highly important and therefore contribute to the fulfillment of the Jendela initiative in our aspiration to be a digitalized nation by 2030. I would leave the details of the technical code to be explained later by Mr. Shanmugam during his briefing and for the panel discussion. And I'd also like to emphasize that the technical codes are in fact living documents evolving with the time and trends and aligned with the developments in technologies. Since it is important to ensure the industry measure its quality of service and quality of experience to better serve the public, it is important to ensure all aspects are also being considered in deploying the crowdsourcing methods for an optimal experience and outcome. Therefore, it is important for us to discuss and deliberate on the draft technical code thoroughly to cover as many aspects as we can, and we need your valuable feedback and comments. We will hear from the panelists later on their expert understanding of the technical code, and perhaps it will give you a better view on what we achieve through this code. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not want to further delay the presentation and the discussion that we will be having today. So before I end my remarks, I want to thank the IFN working group members for their efforts in developing this document. It is such a pleasure working with all of you, and I hope that we can move forward to make sure that these revisions are done in consideration of all the comments and feedback gathered today for submission, and subsequently registration by MCMC and implementation by the industry. For the participants of the public engagement session today, please share your views and questions actively. We have here the experts from the IFN working group to answer your questions. We also welcome any interest in joining the IFN working group or any other working groups under MTSFB if you wish to contribute more actively to the development of the technical codes. Have a great session and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rakuram, for the warm welcoming address and also sharing about the activities under the IMT working groups. Now we have arrived at the main program of the session today, which is the presentation of the draft technical codes. I'd like to welcome Mr. Shanmugam J.S. Indiran, the technical code draft lead, and also the chairman of Crowdsource Application Subworking Group to deliver his presentation. Before we begin, let me introduce to you our speaker. Mr. Shanmugam received his Bachelor of Information Technologies from University of Coventry, UK, and has extensive experience in crowdsourcing application and was invited to share insights related to customer experience initiative, including Jendela quality of experience measurement at the national level. With more than 20 years experience in the telecom industry, he specializes in quality of service initiative, dealing with various crowdsourced application products and developers and custom speed test solution. Mr. Shanmugam joined MTSSP activities since 2021 under Maxis panel and was recently appointed as the chairman to the Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group. He's looking forward to contributing more to MTSSP in other topics such as 5G. Without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Shanmugam on stage.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Salam sejahtera and a very good morning to everyone who's participating today, viewing this live MTSFB public engagement, which is conducted by MTSFB. First of all, I would like to thank everyone, including the members of the industries and MTSFB members, to giving me the trust to lead this technical code on end-to-end crowdsource, measuring using crowdsource application, measuring quality of service and experience. So today's topic would be covering extensively on the need of the crowdsource application and why we feel this technical code is very relevant. Thanks. So the topic of discussion today outlines the introduction of MTSFP group, working groups, technical code development, standards and guidelines, types of crowdsourced data collection, methods to initiate crowdsourced data collection, post-processing procedures, end-to-end architecture for crowdsourced applications, and policy and governance. The outline of the topics covered under the technical code mainly follows the ITU requirements, and as the members of the working group has been reviewing and coming up with the additional requirements, which is well suited to the nation deployment. Next. So we start with introduction of MTSFB and working groups. There are 10 working groups under the MTSFB, okay, and this particular crowdsourced applications falls under working group 2, which is under IMT and future networks. There are also other working groups, sub-working groups under international mobile telecommunications and 5G as well. Next. As we well aware, as presented earlier, the welcoming remark by the Mr. Chairman, Mr. Raghuram, leads the IMT and future networking group, and assisted by Mr. Anwar, okay, from Rods and Swatch, and as a distinguished guest, Mr. Dr. Liu from the University Technology, who is also the secretary for the IMT and future network groups. On top of that, we have the distinguished Professor Dr. Tariq, who is an advisor of the panel, and assisted by the secretariat from MTSFB, which is Mr. Hafiz and Ahmad Shazli. Next. So I am currently the chairman for the technical lead for the sub-working group under the IMT, and we are currently looking into developing a technical code, which is and specializing in crowdsourced technical applications and how it could be further improved in order to measure quality of experience and quality of service. The team which is leading this technical code, is also assisted by Vice Chairman Professor Muhammad Yusuf from Multimedia University, and the secretary for the sub-working group is none other than Mr. Aaron Franklin from Celcom. And the same team from MTSFB, representing by Mr. Hafiz and Ahmad Shazli, is currently the secretariat for the sub-working group. Thank you. Next. Next, we will go through the life cycle of the process we have gone through in terms of the technical code development. Next. So the main purpose of this technical code, as briefly described by Mr. Raghuram, is actually to identify area of concerns of crowdsourced application measurement, provide recommendations and best practices towards improving the overall quality of service and quality of experience of Malaysian subscribers. So this technical code is intended as a reference document for the industry, regulators, as for compliance, and also for the public to identify suitable types of crowdsourced applications. The scope of the technical code covers mainly recommendations covering overall crowdsourced application methodology. Next. Among the interested parties involved in this technical code includes Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission, MCMC, service operators, crowdsourced application vendors, and of course the public. These are briefly in terms of the timeline taken to come up with this technical code draft. We started off in April 2021, and then today we are at the stage of conducting public engagement to get public's feedback on the draft technical code. We intend to provide the submission for approval to MCMC by first week of January, and hopefully, if everything goes well, to provide the submission and approval by 15th of January 2022. Next. I would like to thank all the contributors who have heavily involved in the development of technical code for these crowdsourced applications. They are from the major telco industries, and also compromising from the academics, universities, and also various other organizations, which you can see here, listed here. Thank you. Next. These are common abbreviations that we'll be touching base during the overall flow of this technical code, mainly like QoS, which refers to quality of service, mainly on the KPIs that being used to measure customer experience. For example, like download and upload speed. Quality of experience. This translates to overall experience, which also includes the behavioral factor of the satisfaction of using crowdsourced applications, which includes, like, for example, video experience. What is the quality of experience when consumers view, let's say, video? Next is QCI. QCI refers to quality of service class of indicators, okay, in 4G, whereas QFI refers to quality of service flow identifier in 5G. MVNO stands for Mobile Virtual Network Operator. MOCN stands for Multi-Operator Core Network, while MORAN stands for Multi-Operator Radio Access Network. Next. This is the current flow of the overall presentation. We will start with the introduction of the crowdsourced application, types of data collection, methods to initiate data collection, post-processing procedures, end-to-end setup architecture, and policy and governance. Next. Crowdsourced applications measures QoS, quality of service and assessment, and quality of experience. This methodology currently is gaining wide range of popularity from the public, not only in Malaysia, but throughout the world. compared to the conventional method of conducting performance assessment, mainly through drive tests or static tests. Some of the prevailing advantages of doing crowdsourced application quality of service measurements are due to the large sampling of data that can be gathered throughout the nation, okay, or worldwide, okay, within a very short time. Furthermore, it doesn't require any additional resources to be on the ground to conduct assessment to collect such performance measures. It also represents very closely to the user experience, as the performance is measured directly from subscriber's device all the way to the host server or content servers. Among the challenges that we face today in measuring crowdsourced applications are we have so many crowdsourced vendors today out there, and the measurement methodology are non-standardized across all the crowdsourced vendors. There are also concerns in terms of data accuracy and integrity. Besides that, there are also some concerns in terms of personal data privacy. And for further than that, currently in Malaysia, this crowdsourced applications are not regulated. Next. Next, we will go through the standards and guidelines. There are two national and international authorities involved in this development of technical code, and also the reference that we made to. Okay, first is the MCMC, and secondly is the ITU Union. Okay, International Telecommunication Union. Most of the reference made for developing this technical code are based on the ITU standards. Next. Currently, what we are seeing today on the screen is actually the normative references from ITU and other standards that we have been taken into account in deliberating this technical code. Majority of the reference document are coming from the ITU-T E812 and followed by others like E800, E806, ITU-T10, G.100, and we also make reference to the existing technical code in MTSFB pertaining to 5G deployment. First of all, we start with types of crowdsourced data collection. Basically, there are two types of data collection method defined in the ITU-T documents. One is active test, one is passive test. What is active test? Active test refers to the method of introducing artificial traffic in order to measure the experience. Whereas passive test does not require any artificial traffic. It measures the performance based on the consumption of the user's traffic. Okay, if users are just browsing website, it just collects the data on the background based on the traffic consumed by the consumers. Both this method can be used for collecting both quality of experience and quality of service. This technical code recommends that the collection methodology to be deployed for data collection is to be of a hybrid data collection, meaning it's a combination of both active and passive tests. This will give a more holistic view covering both active and passive requirements and measurements, so that it will provide a comprehensive data sets to conclude and present a user's experience. it is very important for the public and also for the regulators and also other parties to understand the type of crowdsource applications we have in the market today. There are many crowdsource applications, and most of you could may be familiar with crowdsource applications like Ookla, OpenSignal, Tutela, and Perf, Samnos, and so on and so forth. Okay, so each of these crowdsource application providers, the methods of conducting the crowdsource measurement varies from one to another. There are two types mainly. There are some crowdsource applications which measure the network capability, meaning, let's say, if a user have a device capable of measuring 5G and he is connected to the 5G network, the measurement will reflect the maximum capability that the network can offer to the subscriber. The second method is by measuring typical user experience. For this kind of measurement, there are two ways to collect the data, either by doing passive tests, meaning that the data is collected as and when user does the measurement, and the speed would be reflective of the applications and the application requirements required to browse or to use the applications. But I also need to stress here, saying that both the method are still subjected by the product or packages consumed by the subscribers. Let's say subscriber is on a 5 Mbps data plan. So the speed that during the measurement will still be limited to the package subscribed by the consumers. This technical code suggests that the two different methodology explained earlier should not be compared, mainly because the difference in methodology employed and it in terms of the outcome of the results vary from one to another. Next, we look into methods to initiate crowdsourced data collection. It is very important that crowdsourced applications provide the essentials data in order to do comprehensive data analysis of the consumer experience, and also to enable service providers to take corrective actions. If the data is not comprehensive and it's very high level, it is very difficult for service providers to take corrective actions and to improve the consumer experience. Basically, the technical code emphasizes that key crucial information should be made available in the public domain, be it on the website or on the crowdsource application itself, in terms of the methodology deployed for the data collection, the system architecture, the data processing methodology, and to the granular data as much as possible. The third point that we emphasize here is in terms of the sampling. Sampling from the crowdsource application is very crucial. The more samples we gather, the more accurate the data it could be. So there could be concerns on consumers who are in a limited quota data plan, that if they were to initiate a crowdsource application, their quota might be taken up. So in order to avoid such fear and to encourage them to trigger or initiate crowdsource application, this technical code encourages service providers to zero rate crowdsource application traffic. Next is in terms of the high volume data. Okay. Today, the crowdsource measurements covers variety of assessments. This including speed tests, and also moving towards measuring quality of experience It has also involved measuring applications like video, which are widely used by the public. So consumption of video traffic during the measurements, first, it will also, there's a lot of data traffic will be involved during the measurement of the traffic. Hence, some of the crowdsourced application vendors, what they have done is they have embedded the uh, application to initiate the measurement on the and it provides the measurement. It initiates on the measurement in the background. So there's certain requirements that this technical code emphasis is actually in order to measure applications like video. It is highly encouraged that no active applications were running during triggering of the applications. This is to ensure if there's no influence of other applications towards the outcome of the results of the measurement. The technical code also feels that current practice of some of the application vendors who only initiate these tests during the non-peak hours could be further improved, because it is not the reflective of how the user behavior is. Video traffic could be consumed at any time of the day. Hence, if a triggering of the crowdsourced application for video, for instance, are triggered on the background, it is suggested it is to have a combination of both non-peak and off-peak hours to be triggered. So hence, it will give a holistic view throughout the day what is the consumer user experience is in measuring video application, for instance. Next point is, in order to ensure consistent duration of the assessment method, it is very important there's a time limit set for each measurement. This is crucial in order to ensure the test finishes on time and it does not take additional data quota from the user. The next point that we would like to stress is for the crowdsourced application vendors also to be wary of the infrastructure available in the service providers network and the application hostings. Most of the crowdsourced vendors today measure the performance either on the host server or at the content delivery network. But in reality, the most service providers today have taken a step forward in order to ensure best user experience by bringing contents and hosting them locally. So most of the contents are locally cached. So what we would like to emphasize here is the tests conducted by the crowdsourced vendors should be very close to what user is actually experiencing. If the contents are being gathered from the cache, it should be reflective of their experience. Next point is very crucial point. This is in terms of data integrity. As crowdsourced application is getting very popular today, and as mentioned previously during the opening remarks by Mr. Raghuram, the crowdsourced data is also being used for the Jendela initiative, which means it represents the national speed calculation. So data of such importance requires to be highly accurate and have high level of integrity. To ensure that this technical code highly recommends that crowdsourced service providers refrain from doing any type of prioritization or manipulation of the radio and core network resources. Why we are saying this is to avoid a false representation of user experience. If a crowdsourced application, a particular crowdsourced application is prioritized by taking up the resources from the other users and other applications, it just to reflect that the speed is good, but in reality, the user does not experience that. So by doing so, it will give a false impressions of the actual user experience. And today, as crowdsourced applications are also used for benchmarking purpose, it will paint a wrong picture in terms of the actual performance of a particular service provider. Hence, this technical code emphasizes that the regulator also takes necessary actions if at all any service providers were found to be practicing conducting such prioritization technique. And the details of the ways of identification of such practice in terms of what are the types of prioritization techniques available today, what are the examples in terms of methodology to detect such prioritizations have been deliberated in the technical code as well. Next. Next, we'll be discussing, we have touched base in terms of what is the types of data collections and how we initiate them. Next is, once we gather the data, how do we post-process the data? Next. For assessment of crowdsourcing data, it is very important to ensure the sampling size whenever it hits below 90% confidence level. Statistical method used to compute estimation of error and assess sample reliability should be made based on the current reference available in the ITUT, which is in clause A12 in ITUT E806. This is very important so that the current reference that we have made is already been matured enough in the ITUT. Hence, we seek not only the crowdsourced vendors, but also the service providers who are purchasing the raw data from the crowdsourced vendors to abide by these sampling size requirements as per the ITU. Next point is post-data processing. It is crucial that the key components of post-processing, which are filtering, categorization, and aggregation, is also followed through as per requirements in the ITUT document E812. So all these requirements has been clearly been defined in the ITU, and we feel it is sufficient for the current crowdsourced vendors and service operators to abide by those specifications. It is also very crucial that data protection legislation is also followed through in terms of ensuring the crowdsourced vendors and crowdsourced providers also abide by the existing data legislation and to avoid any information or personal data being published or processed. One more item that we look into is the key performance indicator. This crowdsourced technical code emphasizes that at least minimum requirement for collecting such crowdsourced data should at least compass of key crucial KPIs such as download, upload, latency, jitter, and packet loss. That is purely for measuring at least the qualities of service. Next. Next is we look into the user device. Today, as I mentioned earlier, there are two types of crowdsourced measurement methodology employed. One which measures the network capability, and one is the typical user experience. It is crucial that the type of the device, which is being used by subscriber, is also taken into consideration if at all the device meets the specifications as per the technology available on the service provider's network. For instance, if a user is only using an old 3G capable device, whereas the network is built with a 5G or 4G capability, the measurement done from the user's device would be limited to the 3G capability. So when the data is collected, it will be limited by the technology of the device rather than what is available for the user to potentially enjoy. Given such scenario, it is recommended, if reports based on network capability are produced by the service providers, it is advised, or the crowdsource vendors, it is advised that devices which does not comply to the minimum technical specs of the network technology deployed to be excluded from the report. However, this is to prevent wrong misconception of the capability of the sessions captured. However, the same data sets can be still retained by the service providers or the crowdsource vendors in order to do further deep dive analysis, which can be used to identify the type of devices which are showing poor performance, and potentially to also for the for the service providers to upsell these devices, okay, in order to increase the overall experience of consumers. It is also important that to ensure detailed analysis and corrective actions can be taken, that data sets available should also include geolocation information. Then with this geolocation information, it will give us accurate information in terms of roughly where the consumers are in terms of the geolocation, so that the tailored actions can be taken in order to resolve those particular affected consumers in that area. Next. So we have looked into the types of data collection, and then we've moved forward in terms of how we post-process the information. Next topic is about end-to-end setup architecture for crowdsourced applications. The aim of defining end-to-end architecture is to ensure data is collected by the crowdsourced solutions accessing the test server and are dimensioned and routed adequately to support the QoS/QoE measurement. So it is very important when the test is invoked from the user's device that the actual speed can be measured by the users possible. That's why there's a requirement here saying that the dimensioning of the servers are also equally important in order to reflect the true user experience. Okay, so as you can see from the architecture, it is outlined from the user's terminal for access network, core network, and then also terminal equipment where the server is hosted as well. Okay, the test server is hosted at the core network. Basically, this is the typical deployment. But as I mentioned just now, there are also application providers who measure CDN network, mainly for quality of experience measurement like video or gaming. So they use CDNs. So those are two different areas where the server can be deployed, either host server within the within the service provider's network, which is also referred as on-net. Okay, off-net refers to servers which are connected external to the service provider's network, which would be like, let's say, for instance, consumers is today connected Maxis subscriber. They would be connected to, if they're connected to Maxis network server, it will be considered as on-net. If at all they connected to a Celcom server, that is considered off-net. So these are the two options when the test invoked in terms of host server connectivity. It's either on-net or off-net. Okay, it is important that the location of the crowdsource servers are adequately planned and dimensioned so that the pipeline throughout the measurements are optimum in order to achieve the maximum results. For 5G systems, okay, the end-to-end architecture involving crowdsourced application shall also take into account additional considerations. Now, today we are moving from 4G to 5G, hoping we'll be launching it soon. Okay, so it is very crucial that the key criteria of measuring 5G is also taken into account. So types of 5Gs such as URLCC, EMBB, and MMTC also need to be considered. Priority of service rules applied at the 5GC, okay, QFI rules applied at 5GC, and also test server location on net and off net, as I mentioned just now, is also crucial. And besides that, the hosting options. In terms of hosting a server, test server, there are few options. Okay, one is it's a POP, okay, and also CDN, also cloud-based. Today, based on Malaysian 5G setup, okay, it could be the quality of service is important to measure both the access network and also the core network performance. What the technical code emphasis in based on the current setup agreement is to for the 5G MNO to provide access to the 5G access network element manager so that service providers can monitor the fault which are coming from the access providers. It also to ensure the industry regulated 5G access network or 5G new radio KPI levels are formalized and implemented. These are very crucial because when you have two different parties which involved in the overall architecture of a service offered to the consumers, it is crucial to understand and to come to an agreement on the KPIs and the SLAs which will be impacting the end user. And as per the crowdsourced application, it measures end to end. So regardless whether it is access only or on the core. So it is again is a very crucial elements need to be taken into consideration and come into here with the extensive deliberation to ensure that consumers' interests are taken into account. And also corrective measures can be taken as soon as if any failures or any poor performance degradations were detected. It is also important based with 5G deployment, there are a lot of emerging applications would be coming to the market. It is also important that the crowdsourced application vendors keep up to this the advancements of the application and able to measure those crowdsourced services, new crowdsourced services. Next. These are the among the features or the key services that the crowdsourced measurement application should be able to measure in the coming in the future, and some of it are already available today. Okay, these are some are basics like ping test, speed test, call test. These are what currently we have. Okay, but moving forward, as we go and explore new applications like virtual reality applications, gaming applications, and probably high resolution videos. So we need to ensure the crowdsourced applications are able to measure this type of applications. You know, there's also a transition from normal end user equipment to wearable equipments as well. So all this should be measured by the upcoming crowdsourced application versions. Next. Okay, currently we have talked about mobile network architecture. Next is in terms of fixed network architecture. In terms of fixed network architecture, uh, opposed to the mobile architecture where the end user device is normally the mobile phones, For fixed architecture, the end device is most likely either the consumer's CPE, okay, consumer premise equipment, or it could be any of their personal computers or smart TVs and everything. So this is how the connectivities have been evolving. So in order for crowdsource application to be effective, it is also highly recommended the crowdsource application vendors also take into consideration the connectivity which is going to be made possible with upcoming technology. So there are also laptops coming with pre-installed with um, doesn't require any network interface card anymore, which are already built in the chips in order for you to straight away able to view and experience a variety of applications. So it is crucial that the same kind of experience which being enjoyed by the subscribers are able to be measured by the crowdsourced application providers. Okay, so end-to-end architecture, as we see, it also should include the measurements from the equipment, terminal equipment, access network, and so on and so forth. It's almost similar as the uh, mobile network as well. Next, is the another key topic. Okay, so now we have talked about on the application itself. Okay, what are the various methodology, the components of the crowdsourced applications. Okay, next, in terms of policy and governance, as we know today, crowdsourced applications are getting very popular. Okay, and it is since it's getting popular and it's widely been used. And besides that, there are also various publications of report of consumer experience in the public. It is at this junction, this technical code, we feel that it is very important for the regulatory body, not only the regulatory body, but also for service providers and crowdsourced application vendors to abide by certain regulation uh, to ensure that the the methodology, okay, which is being employed by the crowdsourced application vendors, okay, they should be transparent in terms of what kind of sampling method, QoS indicators, and data processing rules being applied, okay. And also from the crowdsourced regulators, it is important that uh, the data which is being published is free from any form of manipulation. So there shouldn't be any interference of the data collection method, and there should be monitoring of the test methodologies, that test patterns. So as a regulatory body, it is also important that the compliance of the data being published and being collected is being done by routine checks and audits to ensure the test methodology is as per what is being documented, and the crowdsourced vendors following by the stipulated recommendations. As for the vendors, it is also crucial for them to keep the regulators informed, not only the regulators, but also the public and also the service providers informed in terms of if there's any changes in the methodology, it should be communicated effectively in terms of the setups and sampling methodology and collection method. Lastly, as a service provider, again, as I mentioned earlier, the integrity of the data is very crucial. So hence, all service providers are required to ensure that it is free from any form of manipulation, and it is true reflection of end user experience. Any form of application prioritization on the crowdsourced application should be avoided at all costs, because the data is being used for benchmarking. If such prioritization is being done, it won't be reflective of the actual user experience, or the the ranking or the capability of each service provider. It will be giving a false impression of the data. Hence, again, all these are crucial. And as we know today, crowdsourced data is not regulated, and one of the main key intention of this technical code is actually to present this technical code to MCMC with the hope that it will be approved and it will be mandated, so that not only crowdsource vendors, service providers also will abide by the general guidelines in order to ensure a true reflective of customer experience is measured and reported. So I think I've talked quite deliberate in terms of the overall uh, process of the crowdsource data collection, processing, end-to-end architecture, and also lastly covering the need for her to have a clear policies and governance on the crowdsource applications to ensure the data is reliable and truly effective of end user experience. Thank you. Before I leave, I hand over to Dr. Bruce. Again, I would like to also to express my if there's any shortcomings in the presentation, please please accept my sincere apologies. And I hand over. I hope the sharing session that I've done so far is fruitful and useful for everyone. Thank you. Hand over to Dr. Jeff.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Shanmugam, for the comprehensive overview and insights on the draft technical codes on end-to-end quality of service and quality of experience using crowdsource application approach. Hope the presentation and the sharing from Mr. Shanmugam can help our participants to understand the crucial aspects of the technical codes. For more details, you may click on the link provided in the Facebook chat to download the full document on the draft technical codes. You're welcome to provide us with the feedback on improving the draft following the same link provided in the Facebook chat at the latest by 14th of December. Before we proceed with the next session, which is the panelist Q&A engagement session, we will pause for a 5-minute short break. Meanwhile, we'll be playing some informative video for your viewing pleasure during the break. See you again in 5 minutes. Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us for the second half of the event. Now we have arrived at the Q&A engagement sessions. So I'd like to welcome our panelists to join me on the stage today. First, of course, please welcome again Mr. Shanmugam Indira, the chairman of the Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group. I'd like to invite also the fellow panelists to join Mr. Shanmugam. They are Professor Dr. Muhammad Yusuf Alias, Vice Chairman of the Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group, Mr. Aaron Franklin Soon, the Secretary of the Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group, and Dr. Norehan Yahya, Drafter of the Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group. Before we begin the Q&A sessions, let me start by introducing our fellow panelists for today. So let me start with introducing to you Professor Yusuf. So Prof. Yusuf obtained his Bachelor of Science in Engineering, Electrical Engineering degree from the University of Michigan in 1998 and his PhD degree from the School of Electronics Computer Science, University of Southampton, UK. He is currently a professor at the Faculty of Engineering at Multimedia Universities and also the counselor for the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineer, IEEE, Multimedia University Student Branch. His research interests cover the field of wireless communications with a focus in topics such as the OFDM, multi-antenna system, multi-user detection genetic algorithms in communications, multimedia application, visible light communications, and also the intelligent reflecting surfaces. Prof. Yusuf has been involved in MTSSB activities since 2019, and he was part of the drafter team for the IMT 2020 System Architecture and Specification Technical Code. He is currently the Vice Chairman for the Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group. Our next panelist is Mr. Aaron Franklin Soon. So Mr. Aaron is currently the Head of Network Service Quality and Experience Management at Telkom Axiata Berhad, and he has more than 20 years of experience in telecoms, covering radio planning, optimization, implementation, and working closely with local and overseas mobile operators and vendors. He's currently pursuing his PhD degree at the Faculty of Computer Science and Information Technologies, UPM. He received his Bachelor of Engineering in Electronics and Computer in 1997 from UPM and holds an MBA degree from Coventry University, UK in 2018. His research interests includes mobile crowdsource analysis, customer complaints and loyalties, approximation algorithm, data mining, and analytics. Mr. Aaron Franklin soon started participating in MTSSB activities since 2021, majorly to provide inputs to the Crowdsource Application Sub-Working Group. He has been appointed as the Secretary of the Sub-Working Group and led the Group B of the drafting committee that is assigned to study on the methodology and analysis from crowdsourcing. So next panelist fellow is Dr. Norehan Yahya. Dr. Norehan is presently the CEO of Excelsis Sadia Berhad, which focuses on telecommunication services. She specializes at identifying and capturing business opportunity as well as positioning companies for the next level of growth. Dr. Norehan has over 20 years of mobile telecommunication experience and 8 years of IoT-related accomplishment. She aspires to continue to contribute towards nation building in the telecom sector in developing 5G into an economic multiplier for Malaysia. Dr. Norehan Yahya has been actively involved in MTSSB since its inception in 2004. She has served as MTSSB as a chairman of the board of directors from 2004 to 2006, as a director from the 2006 until 2011. She is currently active in the IMT and Future Networks Working Group and contributed mainly for the development of IMT 2020 system specification and also the crowdsourcing application technical codes. Please give them a warm welcome by clicking the like and the love button on the Facebook Live comment section. So we will begin the Q&A session by taking questions collected earlier from the public engagement exercise. So let's look at the screen here. We will try to pull out the first question. Okay. So we have a first question basically coming from Karsam Sendrian Berhad. So this is a question, it's like this, you can see on the screen, right? So are the technical requirements enforced for application providers? Okay, I repeat the question. Are the technical requirements for the crowdsourcing application, is it enforced for application providers? So maybe I could invite Mr. Shan to begin. So please feel free to chip in because we like to make this Q&A session to be more interactive. So we would like to make it more like kind of discussion. Okay, so maybe we can start with Mr. Shan, and later on our other panelists could actually join in. So Mr.
Thank you
Shan,
very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Basically, yes, this is a very relevant question at this juncture. To be frank, this technical requirement is currently under the drafting stage. Yes, all the proposals that we are putting into the technical code is ultimately to ensure it is being enforced. Currently, it is, as I said, is under deliberation stage. We have gone through the phase of drafting and getting public feedback. This technical code would be enhanced based on the input from MCMC before it is being approved and enforced. So the hope for this technical code is actually all the recommendations which are covered here includes not only the service providers but also application providers in Malaysian context. So that is our wish. So once we have the technical code approved by the MCMC, we hope that such rules that we are suggesting here in this technical code will also be applied for application providers.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Shan, for the clear explanation. So I would like to kind of summarize the comment by Mr. Shanmugam. Basically, this technical code is not only applied for service provider, but also apply for the what you call application provider. For example, those company providing the crowdsource application. So they actually also need to consider the recommendation from this technical code. Right, so before we proceed to the next question, just like to invite all the audience today to pose a question through the Facebook chat. So I'll be able to see your chat from the comment sections. Okay, please feel free to post your question. Let's say if you have anything related to the presentation done by Mr. Shan just now, or anything topic that you'd like to have clarification regarding the use of the crowdsource application for quality of experience and quality of service measurement. So please feel free to type and post your comments and the question through the chat. Okay, so if I look at here, currently we're still waiting for the question from the audience. Okay, so then let's move on to the next question from our collected question. Okay. So the next question is coming from our participant from UniKL. So the question is related to the privacy. So of course, user will be concerning because the provider might be getting some data, even in the case that some of the data might have some kind of information about the user, for example, the location of the user, okay? And then some other data, the usage or the traffic of the user. So all this will create some kind of privacy concern. So I'd like to invite our panelists to maybe to start with, I can invite Prof. Yusof to start with this discussion on this privacy concern about the crowdsource application.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bruce. I think, of course, everybody has a big concern. Even for us as end users, we're always concerned about data being breached, for example. But I think crowdsource application will be similar like any other application. So they are bound by the Personal Data Protection Act, especially if they are running on Android or Apple, which are bound to a strict privacy policy in countries like the United States. Moreover, in Section 3 of the technical standard, we have specified the types of data that will be collected, and mostly just on the qualities of the network and quality of experience, and not necessarily the privacy data, like all the personal data are not being collected. And even in Section 7 of the technical code, we have actually specified the policy and governance related to the crowdsource application. So this is actually the main reason like why we have this technical code, to ensure the customers' privacy are well protected.
Just to add on top of Professor Yusuf's explanation, it is also important to know that majority of the crowdsourced application vendors today have already engaged in terms of ensuring the data being collected and reported are free from any direct representation of a personal identification. This includes like what we know, like even the GPS locations, which are being collected, are actually being masked to only 3 or 4 decimal points. By doing so, it will not give the identification of exact location of the sampling area, but rather proximity of the area the data is being collected. And most of the crowdsourced data today as well, in terms of the use case for analysis, are being looked into in terms of the perspective of improving consumers on a particular area in general, not identifying specific users and probably resolving the area. So these are done as a proactive measure. So personal data, unless it is also been linked to other personal information, it would be more a concern. But I think all the necessary measures are already in place, and existing data protection as privacy data protection as is sufficient at this point of time. And
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Shan, and thank you very much, Prof. Yusuf. So to recap, I think the important point mentioned by our panel, Prof. Yusuf and Mr. Shan, is that the user-specific information, for example, the identity and then all this user information which related to specific user, they will be kind of removed when doing this crowdsource data kind of sourcing. So in other words, privacy in this kind of crowdsourcing application, there has been kind of considered. And then since the information that being extracted from this application do not contain the specific details of the user, it could be the identity, it could be the location and all these things. So then the privacy issue should be not becoming a major concern, right? Okay, so I think we have a question coming from our audience. Okay, so this is coming from Dean Zain. So Dean Zain, hi Dean Zain, thanks for the question. How does the audit is proposed to be conducted to avoid manipulation by both the service provider and the end user? This is a big concern. Basically, I think this is the motivation also why we have this technical code, right? So because I think all these provider, they are providing the crowdsource application as a paid services. So for example, the the network operator might need to subscribe to these services by this crowdsource application provider. So there's some concern in the case that whether this provider, because it's a commercial services, so if not regulated properly, it might be kind of manipulated, and then to make kind of abuse the data. I mean, to make a benefit out of this commercial kind of arrangement, to benefit certain kind of a user as a certain kind of a subscriber and so on, especially talking about the telecom industry, right? So I think a very, very relevant question. So maybe I open to our panelists to address this important question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bruce. I'll probably take a shot at this. I think in our draft technical code, we have specified that there is a need for crowdsourced vendor to share or be transparent about the end-to-end architecture for the crowdsource application. So this is going to be used in addition to debugging and troubleshooting as also a mechanism to audit. So all the points that the passive and active data is being routed is visible and can be audited by the relevant authorities at any point in time. Thank you.
I may just add another point, 2 points here on top of Dr. Norihan's explanation. Besides the crowdsource vendors, okay, the audit which is aimed at probably from the regulatory regulatory body to conduct could be also aimed at service providers, as the manipulation or prioritization could be taking place at the environment of the assessment, which is actually facilitated by the service providers. In order to conduct such audits, it is also maybe one of the method that can be used is actually for the service providers also to share some of the network parameters being configured specific to certain applications to ensure that such a practice of prioritization does not happen. So this can be done on a periodic basis based on the agreement between the regulatory body and also service providers.
If I may add also, in this case, if you refer to what Mr. Shan has said during his presentation, as well as is referred in the post-processing of data, we have put the requirement of 95% overconfidence level for all the data. That means if the data seems to be looking awkward or weird or somehow it's being manipulated by anybody, it will be dropped during the post-processing of the sampling. So that means there is a measurement or there is a method to actually filter out all these unwanted data, if you call it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Yusof, and thank you, Mr. Shan and Dr. Norehan, for the discussion on this topic. So generally, basically, the data should be transparent so that it could be audited later. And of course, the methodology to make sure that the data or the crowdsource kind of information that being used in a correct way, so that it can actually represent the actual situation in terms of the end user experience. All right, so we have another question from our Facebook user, Facebook audience, or Mr. Azrim Karim. Okay, hi Azrim. Thanks for posting the question. So the question from Azrim, okay, how about the data consumption from the crowdsource user, especially if the user is using a prepaid and having limited data consumption? Are there any ways to overcome this so that user will be happy to contribute to the crowdsource data? Okay, thank you. So this is from the user perspective, right? Because a crowdsource data meaning that you're going to do some tests from the mobile devices, so which can consume the mobile data. So especially for user running on the prepaid or even with a limited data quota, so that will actually consume some of the data there. So I think that's a very relevant question. So I open to our panelists. Maybe Mr. Aaron could help to address this. Mr. Aaron, we couldn't hear you. You might need to unmute your mic first.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bruce. Yeah, it's what Sean has presented earlier in one of the slides. There is something called zero rating. So what the industry has done is that we have actually zero rated the SIM card so that the users can actually do the tests without worry of eating into their data consumption. So you are free to actually do the test and provide us with this useful data for us to actually have a look at what you are facing in the field, and then we can take action from an operator perspective to see how we can improve your user experience.
Thank you,
Okay,
Aaron.
thank you.
I would like to add further. Basically, a part of the recommendations in the crowdsource technical code is we are suggesting that it is up to the service providers deliberation actually to consider to provide to zero rate the crowdsource data specifically for those who are on a prepaid or a limited quota kind of plan. So this is to ensure that there'll be more uptake of the subscribers to do the crowdsource assessment without the fear of their data being consumed. Okay, so this is currently under the proposal. So if all the service providers can reach an agreement to this, yes, of course, we would encourage there's such a feature to be implemented to zero rate the crowdsource data so that we will have more data samples.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shan, for the additional input and also explanation by Mr. Aaron. So basically, the question from Azrin, basically, yes, I think there's approach where we call it zero rated, right? So meaning that the maybe the connection of the data that you use for the crowdsource test will not be counted towards your data quota. So that is kind of an incentive for the user. If I like to think of it, if the service provider can go even further, maybe to provide some kind of incentive. Let's say if the user participate in the crowdsource program, then they're eligible to get additional data, maybe how many GB. Okay, if you participate in becoming one of the user for our crowdsource application, then you get more data. So that's something more encouraging, than the user will be more willing to participate in this kind of crowdsource application. Okay, so right, so very interesting discussion going on. So let's move to the next question. So this is our pre-collected question from our MTVSP industry members. So this is from UCLA LLC. Okay, UCLA, I think, is one of the company famous of doing this speed test, right? Okay, tests done in the background using crowdsource app considered as a good benchmark to measure QoS and QoE. So this is the question, pre-collected question. Okay, so are the tests done in the background using crowdsource app considered as a good benchmark, or in this case, a good metrics to measure the QoS and QoE, right? Okay, so I'd like to maybe open to our panelists. So in this case, maybe Mr. Aaron, you can start the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bruce. Yes, this is useful. The short answer is yes, it is useful for both QoS and QoE. But we do face challenges using background data. For example, some of the users may be keeping the phones in their pants or pockets. That actually gives us more losses from the signal. So it may actually give us a different interpretation of the data when we actually process it. Yeah? So processing the data itself has its challenges. Some mentioned by Prof. Yusof, things like missing data. We also try to actually understand this data from a serving cell, which site is actually serving the subscriber. Yeah, but this data that we collect also we have to understand that they are very dependent on the product offer that we mentioned earlier. So if you are purchasing the different package with different speeds and data quotas, that may also affect the reading as well. So it's important that we actually take this data and then mix it around with the network data. Yeah? So the QoS is what we measure from the network side, whereas the QoE is measured from the subscriber side. If for it to be having a lot of meaning, we somehow need to use this data and mix it with the network data. Yeah? So when we have all these challenges, what we face is that this data has plenty of outliers, and then that is why we need to actually do what we call as a hybrid approach to make this data give better insights to how we want to locate the root cause of why you are facing different speeds and different problems that you face in the field. Yeah. So once we can get it, actually, we can actually take the necessary action in as to how to improve the user experience as a whole. Yeah. But we have to remember as well that this crowdsource is actually voluntarily done by the user. It's a very important part of the entire ecosystem where we somehow need to feel. Now we have a chance to actually understand how the users are feeling and what they go through. Yeah. So when we take your data, we combine with the network data, we can actually detect some form of anomalies in the network. Some cases is related to congestion, some cases related to coverage. So we can take some action and then you will get some improvement in your experience. Yeah. So that's what we are actually able to do. Yeah. So in the background, we also use this data to actually develop certain algorithms and models using new technologies like machine learning to actually do some prediction a bit more accurately. Where do we need to do certain upgrades before you actually feel a bad experience? That is actually what the industry is doing, and it also opens the door to many more usage for the industry. Yeah? Where right now, I think we are looking at AI ML into our processes. This is actually one of the ways to bring in these technologies and combine with the crowdsource apps.
All right, thank you, Mr. Aaron. So maybe other panels want to add up some point.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bruce. Thank you, Aaron, for the very detailed explanation. In this technical code, as I went through earlier, we did take into consideration that, when a test is performed on the background, there are some challenges to it. There could be potential of other applications running on the foreground, which could impact the outcome of the results of the background test initiated during the same time. For instance, if you're already running, let's say, a huge file download, okay, at the same time, and so happens the video test kicks in on the background during the same time, so this will affect the overall performance because majority of the bandwidth is already taken up for the download. So part of this technical code, we have deliberated saying that to avoid such incidents, it is best for the test which is initiated on the background to be conducted when there's not much active applications running. On top of that, we also have taken into recommending that the background tests currently mostly deployed by the crowdsource vendors are only done during off-peak hours. So by doing so, it only gives half of the actual user experience. So in this technical code, we recommend sampling of the background test also to be conducted throughout the day, various times of the day, so that it will capture the essence of true user experience throughout the day, rather than just a sampling which is during off-peak hours, which user off-peak hours, most of the users will be sleeping, right? Nobody will be using the application. So the tech recommendations on the test crowdsource data is actually clear to address this concern. And I think the recommendation that we're putting forward would be able to justify the existence of background data, provided the recommendations are followed through. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chan, for the additional point. So I'd like to recap by what you call the response from Mr. Aaron. So basically, so of course, there's concern here, the background test, whether it's relevant or not, it depends on the methodology. So I think the one mentioned by Mr. Aaron is talking about the, of course, when you're doing the background test, then the approach, of course, is to also correlate with the data from the networks to see that whether we can make some sense out of the data collected by the user from the user side. Of course, when we're talking about the case where user have multiple application running and consuming the bandwidth, so specific methodology will be needed. So in order to have a good way to capture the actual kind of experience by the user, so not related to the time of the day you're using it, and then related to that, how many different other applications you are opening at the same time, which also consume bandwidth. Of course, a detailed methodology, I think I mentioned by Mr. Shan, also is included in the detailed technical code. All right. So, okay, so we have a next question coming from our Facebook audience. Okay, Mr. Yao Gimbun. Hi, Gimbun. All right, so thanks for your question. So is there any other possibility that the crowdsourced measurement is too focused at the area where end user is actively perform the crowdsourced test, while actually some other areas with similar problem, but unfortunately there's no active user providing the crowdsourced data through the crowdsourced test, and as a result of the crowdsourced capturing. So I think it's mentioned that, so let's say if the user is mainly, the data is coming from certain area where there are more users using the crowdsourced test, but there's some problem at the area where there's no user actually running the crowdsourced application. Okay, so that's also a very practical question. So open to our panel to address these queries from our user.
Okay, I can take this question. Okay.
Okay,
First of all, yes, it's a very relevant question, and there are tendency that when we collect the data, there could be certain areas where a lot of users are doing the test samples compared to some areas where very less samples. So hence, it is very important when we look at and how we aggregate the data as well. So for instance, if you look at the data by one day or even 1 week, there's a lot of difference in terms of number of samples we can gather. So mainly today, the crowdsourced applications are aimed at predominantly doing proactive measurement in order to improve customer experience. Hence, there could be instances where the samplings are not adequate from areas which are having problem. There's some ways that probably we can potentially address this. One way is by embedding the application into existing customer service applications, for instance. Every service providers, I'm sure they have the customer service applications, and most of the consumer have installed them. If such crowdsourced applications are embedded in these crowdsourced applications, there are chances of more data will be captured. Hence, if we the problems of not capturing the sampling from problematic areas will be reduced. So I believe if we increase the uptake of or the penetration of the crowdsourced applications, it will gradually will able to get samples from almost all the areas, and we can potentially address a lot of issues which will be made visibly available to the service providers to take action.
Okay,
if
thank you,
anybody
Mr.
else
San.
add, feel free to add on top of that.
Yeah, so invite other panels to add.
Just to add on to this question, we need to understand this crowdsourced samples are truly voluntary, and it's very pretty much based on the sentiment of the user. That's why we call it quality of experience. Yeah? In terms of human behavior, usually most people will only do the test when they are not happy. When they're not happy, they'll do the test. Yeah? So that may actually answer the areas where you have the problems or even similar problems. Yeah. So to the point where the areas don't have data, that's where the background data comes into play, and that will be very helpful if the users actually install the crowdsourced apps from the service providers. That will actually help us to top up whatever data is missing from our subscription from the third-party vendors.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Aaron, for the additional
I'd like
point.
I'd like to add also.
Dr. Norhan, so we can add additional
I
point.
think just to answer additional points to the question is, in addition to active and the passive data as described by Shan and Aaron, MNOs or telcos also have element management systems that detects all these network anomalies or network degradation. So it will not, just because there is no traffic from the crowdsourced applications, either active or passive, it does not mean that the telcos are unable to, be aware of such issues. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Dr. Norihan. So to conclude to wrap up the points by our three panelists, basically for the crowdsourced data, actually coming from two types. I have either it's an active one, and also those passive one could also run in the background. So especially those through the apps from the service provider. So those are important means where the crowdsourced data can be collected and complementary to each other. And of course, just now, the point raised by Dr. Norihan is that on top of that, then of course, as usual, network operator also have the what do you call performance measurement tools, okay, in their network site. Basically, they also can use that to monitor. So that comes in as a kind of multiple different ways of the operators could actually use to assess the quality of service and quality of experience from the users. Of course, the best way, of course, always the user can voluntarily participate in this, what do you call, crowdsourced applications. Okay, so of course, there's now Mr. Aaron mentioned a valid point, because most of the time when our service is good, then we are not going to do anything or try to do any crowdsource, any test using the crowdsource app. But when the problem happens, then we start to resort to doing the test through the crowdsource application. Okay. All right. So thank you very much to our panels, and thank you very much for our audience for posting this very interesting question. Okay. So next, let's proceed with our pre-collected question. So we have a question from Apple. Okay, Apple would like to know, can we understand more about the purpose of this technical code? So that is a general question. I think maybe Mr. Chan can reiterate about this point, which has been just now mentioned during the presentation as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Okay, basically, I think I've touched base in elaborate not only by myself, also by opening speech by Mr. Raghuram. Basically, the main purpose of this technical code today is, as I mentioned, one of it is not currently being regulated. Okay, there's the crowdsource applications providers are increasing in the market. The take up of the crowdsource applications are increasing, it's gaining popularity, and it also becomes very relevant to the extent even it is being for the nationwide digital initiative like Jendela. So given the importance of the crowdsource application, this technical code is aimed to review what is being made available in terms of standards ITU, what is being covered in ITU in terms of the technical specifications, and understand what are the gaps which probably relevant to deployment in Malaysian market today, and to understand the concerns on, and also further improvise on the gaps that we have seen. Okay, so the technical code, if you say in a general term, it is aimed towards collecting more effective data from the consumers towards improving their quality of service or experience. That is the general aim of the technical code. So it also encompasses the various areas of even having the regulatory bodies participation in ensuring that not only service providers, the crowdsource vendors, but also service providers abide by the recommendations that we hope it would be mandated moving forward.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chan, for the very clear explanation of the purpose. I think so. Important point. I think that's to reiterate what Mr. Chan has mentioned. Basically, to ensure that the providers can continue to improve the quality of experience for the user. So the benefit of this technical code, of course, is to benefit the end user, because the industry is working through this technical code to find a good way so that we can make use also the crowdsourced data and complementing the existing network performance measurement metrics. So in order to provide the best user experience to our subscriber. Okay. All right. So next we have next question from the collected question as well. Okay, this is another question from Apple. Okay, so is there any mandatory requirement for the phone manufacturer need to comply to in terms of this crowdsourcing application? So open to our panel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Actually, this is I think it's a valid question since it's coming from Apple. Okay, as per everybody's knowledge today, okay, there are two main operating system providers for the mobile market, which is Android and iOS. Okay, from Apple. So in terms of the flexibility of the data being collected by both Apple and Android varies pretty much. Okay, Apple, as we know, it's a very controlled environment in ensuring consumer privacy and data are being protected. Hence, the flexibility of collection of the measurements from the device are very limited compared to Android, where it's more of an open platform, where the number of APIs available to collect multiple dimensions of measurements of the uh, consumer device and the experience during the usage of applications is vast. So to answer whether it's a mandatory requirement, yes, what we are putting through is to the local government, to the nation MCMC, to ensure that we can collect as much as information as possible in order to facilitate the improvement of the consumer's quality of service and experience. That is the main objective. Uh, but whether the rule in the end will apply for the uh, device manufacturers to abide to, it's still something that we need to wait upon deliberation from the MCMC on the final technical code.
Just to
Thank you
add
very
on,
much.
to,
Yeah,
just
Mr.
to
Aaron.
add on, yeah, the details of the data or proportion that we usually use to do the processing is about 70-30% between Android and Apple. There is a lot of information due to the strict policy Apple is enforcing, where it inhibits us to actually do some deep dive on the data. So we are actually trying to propose that some of this basic information is revealed to us, such as the serving cell of the tower towards the subscriber on the data sample is actually revealed to allow us to actually study and then take action to get this QE to bring the insights in order for us to actually improve the user experience in the end.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Aaron. Okay, thank you, Mr. Shamugan, for the input, and also Mr. Aaron for the additional point. So of course, if we have the phone manufacturer to actually to comply with some of the requirements, so that would be the ideal case. Of course, that is also up to the regulatory body, how they want to implement these kind of, they call it mandatory requirement. Okay, so the technical codes, as we understand, basically to provide the guidelines and also best practice to the industry. So about the mandatory requirements, of course, that is the in the judiciary of the regulatory body in Malaysia, of course, it's the MCMC. Okay, so right, so let's look at the, let me look at the question here. Okay, so we have a pre-collected question as well. Okay, coming from Smart Friend Telecom. Okay, is crowdsource application really having fair benchmarking of all operators, not getting influenced by certain priorities implemented for the CDN use or the location of the CDN? So CDN, I believe, is the content distribution network, if I understand correctly. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. So we're open to the panels to answer this question. So it's about the fairness issue, whether just now we talk about privacy, then now we talk about whether this measurement that we get from this benchmarking using the crowdsourcing application, is it considered fair?
Okay, so probably I can start off. And basically, okay, if we look at the benchmarking performed today, there are two methods. One is either on the which is hosted by the service providers, or another one on the CDN network. Okay, for CDN network, normally when we do the analysis of the data, the CDN connected by the subscribers or the service vendors normally are localized to each country. So it will be reflective of the experience of the subscriber from the end device to the contents available within the country. Okay, so today we know in terms of applications being CDNs, it is local hosted, either can be in the country, or even a lot of applications are even hosted in Singapore, for instance. Whether it's a true reflective, so this is where the measurement need to probably in terms of the crowdsource vendors need to probably evaluate in terms of where the majority of the traffic are coming from. If of the majority of the traffic are coming from the local CDNs, then it is very appropriate for them to measure based on the particular CDN. Okay, there are also a lot of service CDN providers today. Okay, namely like AWS and Akamai and few others. So in terms of the selections of the CDN, which is most appropriate for a particular content, need to be studied by the application vendor in order to be true reflective of the contents which is being served to the consumers. So hence, whether is it currently a fair benchmark of all the operators getting influenced by certain CDN, as I said, it varies from market to market, okay, from a country to country. So it is best at least the measured CDN is a localized CDN. As we know today, even like for video content, most of it is being cached. So hence the measurement to the CDN from which is located locally is more appropriate, and it is depends on the percentage of the kind of traffic it's being hosted currently.
Okay, thank you.
Add to it.
Thank you, Mr. Shan. So, other panels, do you have any additional point to add?
Yeah.
In addition to, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. Norian.
Yeah, Dr. Norian, yeah, you can start first.
In addition to what Mr. Shan has mentioned just now, which I think is related to active crowdsourced data, of which certain contents are being already pre-programmed as part of the testing. Yeah, that's why in our draft technical code we're proposing passive data also, of which actual user traffic is being measured and assessed. So that will provide an overall actual user experience and the outcome of the QoE measurements associated with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Norihan. So, Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, just to add on to what Chan mentioned, most of the operators, if not all, do have peering and catching technologies installed in the network. Yeah? And these crowdsource benchmarking results that are showing us may or may not actually reflect the actual experience measured from the technologies that we put in, yeah? Because they're actually measuring at the far end, but in fact, when the user actually using the service, they're actually getting a faster speed from the peering and catching technologies that we use, and likely this is not captured in the results.
Okay. So this is also been proposed in the technical code. So to be for the crowdsource vendors to be aware of the infrastructure made available by the service provider in order to reflect the true experience.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Shan, Mr. Aaron, and Dr. Norihan. So the important point, of course, the just now summarized by Mr. Shan just now, important is that the crowdsource vendor need to be aware of the infrastructure as well. Where is this the location of the CDN? Is it a cache or localized CDN, or could be a remote CDN? So that could actually telling a different story, right? If you have a localized, then of course your performance is always very good. So when talk about remote CDN, then performance, of course, will be kind of affected by how is the performance, or how is the distance, how far is it from the end user. So of course, this from the technical code, I think has all the detail about how to ensure that the vendor, the crowdsource vendor, can be made aware of this local CDN infrastructure as well. Okay. All right. So So let me see the comments here. So if I look at the Facebook chat, so currently there's no more question from the participants. And then we have actually addressed all the collected question from our industry participants. So before we end, let me invite Mr. Shan to give brief concluding remarks for this panelist discussion session. So Mr. Shan, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Thank you very much, everyone who have been actively participating in this live Facebook session. Okay, and all the queries that's been posted to us. Those are mainly very relevant questions, and I hope not only myself, together with the panelists we have today, are able to answer most of your questions. But feel free to continue to engage with us through MTSFB. As we said, this current technical code is at the draft level. Okay, we seek public's comment on this paper. Okay, so that we can further improve and make it as a success in terms of meeting everyone's expectation. So thank you very much. If there's any shortcomings, I apologize for the shortcomings on behalf of all the panelists here. I think everyone tried our best to answer the question as much as possible and clarify the doubts that the subscribers have posted. We look forward to your continued support. Please, continue to provide your feedback on the from the NTFCB side in order for us to gather the insights on the technical code. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Shanmugam, for the concluding remarks. Thank you so much, everyone, for your active participation, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in thanking the panelists today for a lively discussion on these draft technical codes on the crowdsource applications. So this marks the end of our program today. Before we go off, for your information, the presentation slide will be shared on MTFSB website, and the recording of this session will be made available on our Facebook page. We will really appreciate if you can give your feedback of this event by clicking on the feedback form link posted in the comment section, or you can scan the QR code displayed right now. And of course, all of you are invited to review the draft technical code and submit your comments until 14 December. So we are the comment forms at our websites, mtssb.org.my, or you can follow the link in the Facebook chat, and also referring to steps shown in the tutorial video in order to download the draft technical code, review it, and then provide your valuable comments. Feel free to contact us if you have any inquiries related to the draft technical code, and stay tuned to our latest update through our social media platform on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. On behalf of the organizer, Malaysia Technical Standard Forum Berhad, I would like to thank all of you for your continued support for this event, and I hope to see you again in our future event. So with that, thank you very much and have a very good day ahead. So see you next time. Bye.